for three. Yes! And
Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online, our great presenting sponsor, and they are the world's most trusted betting platform. Bet Online is your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here as we get into a fresh edition of the Bearcat Blitz podcast. I am, of course, your host, Russ Eltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer of Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com. And you can catch my work at Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Both of us, once again, missed the Bearcats prediction. I don't know why we put weight into a team that hadn't won a road game in basically a month over the weekend, but we did. Neil and I did, and both of us got that one wrong. A 11-point loss at the hands of the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who actually came to play on their senior day, unlike Cincinnati a few nights earlier on their senior day festivity. 78-67 loss. We'll get into that on this episode. We'll touch on a prediction for Tuesday's rematch, just running it right back in the 12-13 game to kick off, or to tip off, I should say, the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. And then we'll take a quick break after that as well and get into our top storylines for spring football, which the first of 15 practices getting going on Monday. And it will be a fun look over the next month plus at where Cincinnati football stands early on in the 2025 portion of things. All that coming up after this break on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, the more things change, the more they stay the same for Cincinnati Bearcats basketball, who in the regular season on a 3-game losing streak, they are now definitively done in the at-large race for the NCAA tournament. There is no scenario where they do not, or where they get into the NCAA tournament without winning their next 5 games, which is all that's left in the season slated for them currently, although they are contractually obligated to play in the Fox Sports Crown Tournament out in Las Vegas. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it in the next couple of weeks, because that is slated to, I believe, start on the last week of March. I know it starts a few days after players.
A week after the transfer portal opens. So March 31st is when that kicks off.
Right, and the transfer portal opens March 24th. So depending on how far the Bearcats go, who knows how many players are going to actually be available to Wes Miller and his staff to take out Wes to play in that tournament. We'll cross all those bridges when we come to them. We got a bridge on fire right in front of us right here, Neil, as once again, the effort not there across the full 40 minutes. The rebounding, a mess for Cincinnati, 41-37 rebounding disadvantage against the Oklahoma State, a Cowboys team that, just like Cincinnati, is one of the bottom half teams in the conference in terms of rebounding the basketball. UC goes 1 of 8 down the stretch and allows a 12-2 run over the final 4 minutes to basically give themselves zero hope of winning this basketball game. They led at 12-10 early on in the first half and then never led from there. I believe they got it to within 2 and 3 points total.
Within 1. It was 1.
Yeah, within 1 point. And Neil, it's the same stuff over and over and over again. What did we say going into this game? A big bruising forward in Abu Asmane, former Xavier player. Can't let him take over the game. You can't let his physicality dominate the game. He didn't have to in the beginning because Bryce Thompson was cooking with 10 points in the first 10 minutes of this one, but he took the reins from there. 24 points out of Ousmane, 8 rebounds, just 1 turnover. He goes 5 of 7 from the free throw line. The team shoots 13 of 17 overall to Cincinnati's 4 of 7 mark from the line. Wash, rinse, repeat, basically the same issues in terms of effort, in terms of balls to the wall, gotta have it, gotta go get it mentality from this team. It was the same thing we saw on Wednesday, essentially. They just repeated it on the road.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm right there with you, Russ. Obviously, the performance on Saturday was not what many expected because you and I both had Cincinnati coming out of
We had them showing some
coming out of
fight,
this
and there
weekend with
wasn't a lot of fight to be
victory.
shown, Neil. Jeez.
And you're absolutely right on that because you look at what happened, Russ. You go up, what was it, 12-10 early, and then Oklahoma State makes their run. They lead from there on out. But, I mean, down the stretch is where it has continuously hurt Cincinnati, the inability to finish games. I mean, you look at Kansas State, right? You cut it within, you tied the game essentially versus Kansas State. And I mean, that was a Kansas State team that was just saying, hey, come take it from us. Like, we do not want to win this game. And in the end, Cincinnati goes, 1 for their last 9 over the course of 4 minutes. No buckets there. It was a wash, rinse, and repeat performance on Saturday in the final minutes of this one, Russ. I mean, think about it. You're down by what? As much as 17 at one point. You cut it down to a 1 point.
It was an 18-point deficit, I think.
Then you cut it down to a 1 point deficit with about 4 minutes to go. And then what happens? Everybody just poops the bed, essentially, right? You go another 4 minutes without a bucket. The team Oklahoma State goes on a 12-0 scoring run to end the game. That is it just can't happen in the Big 12 play. And everybody knows, especially with the team sitting on the bubble, you just can't have those moments and those lapses where you go and you give up a 12-0 run to end a game, especially when you know how desperately a win would have meant for Cincinnati. You could have potentially built some momentum heading into the conference tournament. But instead, Russ, what happens? We're sitting in a very similar situation like we were last year for Cincinnati, where you head into the conference tournament. They lost to West Virginia in the final game of the season in 2024. And what happened? That 12-13 matchup where you had to turn around and you had to play them the very next day, essentially, in the opening round of the Big 12 tournament. Like, realistically, Russ, Cincinnati flew in from Oklahoma State on Saturday night, got back late Saturday around dinner time, just to fly back to Kansas City the next day in preparation for playing at 11:30 a.m., when in reality, they were hoping that with a win, you wouldn't have to play until 8 o'clock the next night on that Tuesday. So hopefully they would have had a little bit more time in Cincinnati, but instead they're now quickly turning around, having to fly back across the country in preparation for another matchup with the team that just beat them by 11.
Oh, just a horror show redux from Saturday to Tuesday. It's just like, man, I'm going to break some news here. I will not be picking the Bearcats to win this game on Tuesday afternoon. They have to prove to me they can win away from Cincinnati against teams like this is a similar caliber team to UCF. So, I mean, yeah, it's been a month since the Bearcats have gotten on the board away from Fifth Third Arena. And Neil, largely because this offense is just dead on arrival. It's just dead on arrival. It's not consistent enough. They can't get to actions early enough in the shot clock. They couldn't take advantage of the tempo in this game and use it accordingly. They got up 69 shots in this one, thanks to 12 turnovers from Oklahoma State, but they still only shot 40.6% from the floor. Like, you're not winning in the Big 12 shooting 40% from the floor consistently night in and night out, which has been a massive problem for the Bearcats. And they're barely over that mark on average, shooting 42.9% from the field in conference play this season. Neil, and it's just where they're at right now, honestly, with the way the offense is. But it's a lot of Jizzle James, it's a lot of Day Thomas, and it's a lot of bricks from those guys. 5 of 13 shooting from Thomas, 6 of 21 shooting from Jizzle James, who once again, Neil, takes what had one free throw trip of substance, and the other one were technical foul free throws. Like, what is going on? Why can't he or Day Thomas, for that matter, get to the free throw line? They shot a combined 4 free throws in this game, 7 total as a team. I mean, it's just you're playing offense on extremely hard mode doing it this way. And it's no shade individually at those players. They're doing their best. They're strong individual talents. But Day Thomas this season, Neil, is shooting under 42% from close 2-point range, mid-range, and 3. Like he can't be a dynamic and diverse scorer and heavy volume shooter with those kind of numbers. Day or Jizzle James, it's very similar. And I'll pull up the marks here in just a second. But the offense is just completely dead on arrival. They can't consistently get to that 70-point mark because they can't consistently create actions from anywhere outside of their guards this season. Dylan Mitchell, once again, nothing to give you on offense, 2 for 3 from the field, just a non-factor offensively. Dan Skillings, they waste a good Dan Skillings game, basically the first good, solid, all-around 40-minute game they've gotten out of Skillings in almost 2 months at this point. He goes for 15 points, 4 assists, and did have 3 turnovers, but he gave them some juice at least on the offensive end. And then when we look at the Jizzle numbers that I'll pull up right now, James is shooting under 43% from the mid-range and under 29% from 3 this season, while shooting, I believe, at 60% or higher at the rim. So, like, those numbers don't make sense, Neil. Why are you not attacking the rim more often if you're Jizzle James, attacking the rim more often if you're Day Thomas, and just trying to avoid these fadeaway mid-range jump shots, these fadeaway off-balance jumpers that you are almost never going to get fouled on? I don't get what the offensive game plan is at this point. It feels like this is just the guy that's cast at this point in the season, and you try to figure it out and run it back next year. But those 2 guys can't be the lead guards in 2025, 26, because there's just no defined path to enough offensive efficiency to justify that. It's way too hard to play offense for this team right now, and you're just not getting anything from anywhere else on the roster. I can't believe the precipitous fall from Simas Lukosius we've gotten this year. Maybe it's still lingering shoulder injury effects. Who knows? But he goes out there for just 16 minutes, goes 1 of 4 from the field, all of them 3-point shots, and 1 for 2 from the free throw line. He was rough in this game. Add in the fact that you had 6 combined turnovers from those guards who shot 9 of 34 from the field. It's just, or 11 of 34 from the field. It's way too hard for this offense right now. And Neil, those are the only 2 players who hit multiple threes. Everybody else, if they hit a 3, they only hit 1. There's just the spigot is completely dry for this offense in terms of upcoming contributors or other contributors that they can go to besides Thomas and James.
Yeah, and it's a good point you mentioned that too, Russ, because this is where the injury to Connor Hickman impacted the team more than people realize, because Connor Hickman was going to be that third ball handler off the bench who could provide.
And
that
Tyler
scoring.
McKinley. I mean, Arrington Page, does he exist? Is he alive? Does he exist? Like, he did not play. Did he play in the last game? Oh, a classic Arrington Page stat line: 3 minutes, 1 shot, no points. He's lost, Neil. He is a lost basketball player throughout from December 30th on. Arrington Page has it's basically like he's not even a part of the roster with how little he's played.
And it's also, too, imagine if Cincinnati was able to get Connor Hickman healthy for a season, or if they had a Tyler McKinley, they would be able to do a lot more things on the offensive end. But Russ, like you mentioned, this team is simply relying on Day Thomas and Jizzle James to get any sort of offense going. The last 3 or 4 games, we have seen both of those 2 combined for almost 30 shots between the 2. Outside of that, you have to find somebody on this team that is willing to stick their head out and start making some aggressive plays. You would love to see them crash the rim, right? Dan Skillings had a great performance on Saturday, but this is the Dan Skillings kind of performance we were looking for the last 2 months. They need
too little,
to find,
too late at this point.
They need to find ways to be aggressive, right? And get downhill and attack. If they're going to want to make any kind of run in the Big 12 tournament, Russ, they're going to have to find ways to get downhill and attack. They're going to have to. And if they don't do that versus Oklahoma State, it's going to be a long week out in Kansas City, to say the least. And it might be a short week if they aren't able to get anything going early on Tuesday. But like you mentioned, this team is simply searching for just about everything. And I think realistically, the injuries to Hickman and McKinley play a big role in that. But you also would have liked to see more production from Arrington Page. The fall of Seamus Lukosius this year. Now we don't know, is that still from a lingering injury? We don't know.
The
But
CMOS production of late, I will cut him some slack because he's probably gutting through like a
gutting through that
serious
shoulder.
hurt for sure. But Arrington Page, there was talk about him maybe dealing with a foot injury throughout the past couple months. Is he still dealing with that? Like, if you're healthy enough to play, at some point you have to give something, especially in the NIL era we are living in today. And Neil, this is what Arrington Page has done over the past 10 games since the win, since their game on February 2nd, 2025. Arrington Page has averaged 2 points, 1 of 4 shooting from the field, 4 field goal attempts per game, and 6 total rebounds. He has gone over, he's not averaged 2 points, he's scored 2 total points, gone 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0 against Oklahoma State most recently. And he's playing 4 minutes, 1 minute, 6 minutes, 1 minute, no minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to have any kind of front court rotation with the unreliability from a player like that. It's just complete shell-shocking actual production from Arrington Page this season compared to what people expected him to be as the main backup center behind Aziz Bandaogo. 2 points per game this season, a total of 1.6 total rebounds in conference play, and 6.4 average minutes per game. Just he's not even a part of the rotation at this point in the season. That's one of the more underrated disappointments of the 2024-25 season has been the fall off of Arrington Page, or the never even getting on to have a fall off from Arrington Page. They really needed somebody in that front court to impact things, and that's just not happened. They're so guard dependent right now because of how little they're getting from the front court and the wings in general. And it's a big reason why they lost this game by 11 points and once again failed to get past the 70-point marker. Neil, let's go ahead and predict the Tuesday action against Oklahoma State before we get to our first break here, and then get to second break, and get to some football storylines as the spring sessions get rolling. Cincinnati probably going to be favored again, I would imagine, somehow, some way. The odds makers will maybe make them a 1 point to 2 point favorite. They might just not even give them the favorite status after what they posted on Saturday. As UC enters the game 50th in the net rankings, 56 on Ken Palm. OSU is 94th and 96th in those metrics, and Bart Torvik gives Cincinnati a 69% chance to win the game with a projected score of UC 72 and OSU 67. A 12:30 Eastern tip on ESPN Plus. Neil, to get the first round of the Big 12 tournament rolling. Cincinnati trying to move to 3-5 all time against OSU. Basically, based on what we just talked about over the last 10 minutes, and with how poorly Cincinnati has played away from Fifth Third Arena this season, I can't pick the Bearcats to win this basketball game. I can't do it. They've lost 6 of their past 7 games away from Fifth Third Arena. The Cowboys have been very bad on the road as well. But Cincinnati, I mean, since the win at Colorado on January 15th, their only win away from Fifth Third is at UCF. So I can't put trust in, as quickly as this turnaround was, and then being able to figure this thing out. And I mean, honestly, it sounded like that's the case for Wes Miller and his staff too. Like they asked him, Terry Nelson on the radio broadcast, color commentator for 700 WLW, asked him, like, what do they do to fix this ship, to right this ship? And Wes Miller essentially said, like, at this point in the season, with how quickly you got to turn things around, there's not much you can do. You just have to try to execute your keys better. And I'm paraphrasing with that quote right there, but there's not a lot of time to figure this out and to really do a whole lot different. Neil, they have to just try to be as physical with Abu Usmane as they can be, try to outwill them on the boards. We'll see if they can do that, but with the confidence that this Oklahoma State team is going to be carrying into this game, and how easily they got to their spots on offense, and how easily they were able to feed Usmane for so many good, clean looks, I got to go with with the Cowboys here. I cannot pick the Bearcats in this game. 72-70. Give me the Oklahoma State Cowboys as I try to move to 25-7 in what will be the end of the regular season and tournament predictions if Cincinnati goes out like I foresee them doing in this game. How are you feeling about it, Neil?
Yeah, I'm feeling, I don't know. It could be one or two ways, Russ, right? You look at it and they're favorited, or you look into this thing and Oklahoma State's favorited, and me expecting both teams have played awful on the road over the last few weeks and this season. Me personally, I think this is Oklahoma State's game to lose just because of now they're riding a high coming off the win over Cincinnati. But Cincinnati has a short turnaround. Oklahoma State was at home. They didn't have the travel issues. They now get an early game. I think that could play into this factor. But Russ, like you mentioned, I don't see Cincinnati scoring over 70 points. And here's my reasoning on that. Oh, wait, they haven't scored over 70 points in the last 2.5 weeks. I don't see it happening again. Their last time they scored over 70 points was in their win over TCU on February 22nd. So literally almost a month since they have scored.
And it's been a month since they've done it. They've done it one time in the past month, and that was the win over TCU, who, Neil, that was the worst basketball team that's come into Fifth Third Arena in the past 2 seasons. Like, yeah, they don't get a lot of credit from me for putting up 75 against TCU.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing too, right? Is how will this offense respond? I mean, I'm sure if I'm Oklahoma State, I'm banging the ball into Abu Osmane 24/7 again, like they did on Saturday. That's going to be the difference maker. Was Cincinnati able to withstand another strong performance from Osmane? If so, it's not going to look good for Cincinnati if that's able to happen. However, having that early 12:30 Central or 12:30 Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Central time tip off out there in Kansas City, I don't like it personally if I'm Cincinnati. If you would have won on Saturday, you would have had a late game. So I'm rocking with Oklahoma State in this one, and then we'll see whatever happens with the Crown tournament after.
Can't believe how bad this defense has been defending the 3 as well for Cincinnati this season. It's been really rough. And when you look at them in the conference slate, they're giving up right around 35% shooting from outside in the conference slate. I believe it's 14th or 15th out of 16 teams in the conference. Trying to pull up the exact number right now, but it's been a little slow on me with the internet connection. But I mean, Oklahoma State played their perfect game plan. They ran the floor heavily on Saturday. They made it difficult for the Bearcats in terms of just up and down, up and down, up and down, total fast break points. UC actually won those 11-2, but OSU's ball movement and quick actions allowed them to get the ball to Ousmane quickly in the paint and allowed them to destroy in the paint Cincinnati 38-26 and get those 7 3-pointers made, which has just been the biggest issue defensively for Cincinnati all conference slate. 13th, excuse me. No, I was right. 15th in total 3-point defense in the Big 12 slate, 34.9% allowed. I don't see the problems getting fixed to make up for an 11-point gap, which was basically how it felt. I mean, it wasn't like UC got a bad whistle or anything. It wasn't like Oklahoma State shot 30 free throws. They played their game. They played cowboy ball, and they rolled Cincinnati around for much of the afternoon because of it. We'll take a quick break here. And speaking of cowboy ball, we'll get to some Bearcat football here coming up as we turn the page to another season, another stage of the offseason for that program. Neil, spring football gets going for the Cincinnati Bearcats on, we won't say the exact day and schedule and all that stuff, but a few practices this week. And then they have spring break next week. And then it's back at it with 3 sessions per week, basically up through the middle of April, including the spring showcase in a few weeks, a few Saturdays time here. A lot of returning talent. Neil, ESPN ranked Cincinnati one of the top teams in the country in terms of returning talent in 2025. 68% of production is returning this fall That is 12th nationally among all FBS teams. A lot of that on defense when you think about guys like Dante Corleone, Jake Golday, Jack Dingle, all of those big names in the middle of the defense coming back. I think biggest kind of talking point going into spring football, though, is how does special teams come together? This is the first time that Cincinnati is going to have new return unit, new punting unit, new kicking unit, and a new special teams coordination hierarchy because we don't know there's not an exact special teams coordinator labeled on the coaching staff, but we've talked about how bad they were in this aspect last year. I mean, no returns of 20 plus yards in the punt game, no kick returns of 30 plus. Mason Fletcher was horrible in 2024, 42.6 punting average. Insert his brother now for 46.95 punting average in 2023 by Max. So he should be able to bring that position back up to speed well. And then kicking wise, Steven Rusnick, Charlotte product, one of two kickers to go 100% on field goal tries last season among those that took 10 or more attempts, 11 for 11 on field goals, did not miss an extra point, went 25 for 25 there, and he went 3 for 3 on 50-plus yard field goals. So he should shore up that spot. And then we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, Scott Satterfield saying that they are willing to play anybody in that return spot to make sure they maximize their special teams unit in 2025, a unit that was, I believe, 86th nationally in PFF grading in 2024 overall. And then when you look at the return averages, 61st in kickoff return average and 113th in punt return average. Neil, there's so much low-hanging fruit here for this unit that getting them up to average or better could merely be enough to hit that 6-win threshold, even if there's no improvement from the other two more focused on aspects of the game.
Yeah, and that's a great touching point too, Russ. But the biggest thing for me that I'm looking forward to in spring football is how do you replace that offensive line? You lose guys like John Williams. You lose Luke Kandra. You lose D'Artagnan Tinsley. You lose Philip Wilder. You lose 4 of your 5 starters from a season ago, and 3 of those are heading to the NFL. Phil Wilder's testing the NFL draft waters, but 2 of those guys could probably hear their names called, and John Williams and Luke Kandra. So overall, how do you replace those guys? Who's going to be the guys to step in? Will it be a Nolan Latalupe, who is the Albany transfer? Would it be an Evan Tangenstall? Would it be a Xavier Lozowiski? We already kind of know Tyron Teo is going to be one of those guys to kind of fill in at that guard position based on some of the stuff we've seen this offseason in the weight room, some of the videos that came out. I mean, Scott Satterfield and them the other day even mentioned that he can apparently squat a quote-unquote house, which was in reference of about 550 pounds. So overall, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who are those guys that step into that position. I mean, Gavin Gerhardt is your lone returner up there. It's going to be an inexperienced offensive line. And Russ, that's something that you and I haven't seen since, 2020, roughly 2021, since we've been covering this team. It's been a long time since we've seen a very new offensive line. All of Cincinnati's offensive line has been connected with playing with each other for the last 3 to 4 years. I mean, D'Artagnan Tinsley's also a returner, but outside of there, you got, or not D'Artagnan Tinsley, DeAndre Buford. He's returning. Yeah. You have Gavin Gerhardt. Those are literally your only 2 significant returners who have saw playing time outside of Evan Tangenstall, who was a reserve last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how do those guys come together and how do they come together and open up the run game for guys like Tawee Walker and Evan Pryor.
So many big things to touch on. I mean, what else is there? The
wide receiver
running back hierarchy is going to be interesting. How does the snap shake out this year? Are they going to get more Evan Pryor run? They're going to get more Chance Williams run after he redshirted, and see how that files in behind Tawee Walker. How does the wide receiver hierarchy shape up? We'll start to really get a feel for all that over the next few weeks. Probably not a lot of takeaways next week from the first 2 practices, because I believe there's only going to be 2 practices open to the media on this opening week, but we'll have you covered with plenty of strong insight and takeaways on the spring practices over the next few weeks. And of course, we'll have you covered on the Bearcats' fate in the Big 12 tournament. We'll see if they're still playing when we reconvene later on this week for the next edition of Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. Have a great Monday, everybody. Enjoy this awesome weather in the tri-state area.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.